I'm Luna, 32, female, and my parents tried to take my son from me after I refused to pay off the debt they accumulated by spoiling my sister. It's a sentence that feels like it belongs to someone else, a plot from a melodramatic movie. Yet, it's my reality. The people who were supposed to be my protectors, my unwavering support system, became the single greatest threat to my life and the safety of my child. Their actions didn't spring from a single disagreement. They were the culmination of a lifetime of favoritism, a deep and corroding imbalance that had defined my family for as long as I can remember. My family consists of my father, Richard, a man who carries the authority of his former factory supervisor role into every aspect of his life, my mother, Carol, who uses a veneer of soft-spoken concern to mask a will of iron, and my younger sister, Jessica. And then there's me, Luna, and my bright, beautiful 5-year-old son, Leo. To my parents, Jessica was the sun. She was brilliant, dazzling, and the center of their universe. I, on the other hand, was more like a distant moon, reflecting a little of the family light but never generating any of my own. I was practical, responsible, and stable. In my parents' eyes, these were not virtues but boring necessities. Jessica was the artist, the dreamer, the one with potential. I was just the sensible older sister, the built-in safety net. This dynamic wasn't a subtle undercurrent, it was the overt, acknowledged law of our household. I have a box of memories, not all of them fond, that prove it. One of the clearest examples dates back to my high school graduation. I was the valedictorian. I had a speech to give, an armful of academic awards to receive, and a future I had meticulously planned. My parents had promised a huge family dinner afterward. They talked about it for weeks. But the day before, Jessica, who was in middle school at the time, found out that a regional dance recital she'd forgotten to mention was on the same night. It wasn't a competition, just a showcase. There was a brief, theatrical show of a family discussion. My father paced the living room, stroking his chin. "Well, this is a pickle," he said, though his mind was clearly already made up. My mother wrung her hands. "Luna, honey, you know how sensitive Jessica is. Her heart is set on this recital. Your graduation is wonderful, of course, but it's a long ceremony. We'll be there in spirit." In spirit, I had asked, my 16-year-old heart sinking. But I'm giving a speech. I'm the valedictorian. My father clapped his hands together as if settling the matter. "And we are so proud of you for that. But Jessica needs our support. She gets such terrible stage fright. We have to be there for her." They missed my graduation. I sat on the stage, scanning the audience for their faces, knowing they wouldn't be there. I gave my speech to a crowd of strangers and smiling teachers. I accepted my awards and shook the principal's hand, feeling a profound sense of loneliness. Later that night, they came home, buzzing with stories about Jessica's performance. They showed me blurry photos of her in a sequined costume, her face painted with a dramatic stage smile. They had a small, wilting bouquet of flowers for me from the grocery store. "We're so sorry we missed it, sweetie," my mother said, "but you should have seen your sister, she was a star." I never got my celebration dinner. We had leftover pizza instead. This pattern only solidified as we got older. When I was in college, I needed a cosigner for a small student loan to cover my housing for my final year. It wasn't a huge amount, but I didn't qualify on my own. My parents, who had a good credit history, flatly refused. "It's too risky, Luna," my father had said, shaking his head as he reviewed the paperwork I'd brought him. "What if you can't find a job right away? This could affect our financial standing. You need to be more self-sufficient." I had a part-time job, excellent grades, and a clear career path in graphic design. I was the furthest thing from a risk. But they wouldn't budge. I ended up taking on a second, more demanding job, and my grades slipped slightly from the exhaustion, but I managed. I did it on my own. 2 years later, Jessica, who had decided college wasn't for her, wanted a brand new car to help her get to auditions and build her brand as an aspiring actress. Without a moment's hesitation, my parents co-signed a 5-year loan for a car I knew she couldn't afford. "It's an investment in her future," my mother explained to me on the phone, her voice brimming with excitement. "This car will give her the freedom she needs to pursue her dreams." When I quietly reminded her that they had refused to help me with a loan for my education, the very thing that had secured me a stable career, her tone turned cold. That's different, Luna. Your path was always more straightforward. Jessica needs a little more help to get S. Tarded, you shouldn't compare. It's not becoming. Comparing was something they did constantly. They would praise Jessica's chaotic, unpredictable life as brave and creative, while my steady career and responsible choices were deemed safe and unimaginative. When I bought my first small condo, my father inspected it and said, "It's practical, I'll give you that." When Jessica spent $1,000 of their money on a weekend acting workshop that resulted in nothing, they called it a valuable networking opportunity. When I became a single mother to Leo, the dynamic became even more pronounced. I loved my son with a fierceness that consumed me. He became the center of my world. My parents portrayed themselves as doting grandparents, but their involvement was always on their terms and usually revolved around Jessica. If Jessica needed a ride to the airport, their plans to babysit Leo were canceled. If Jessica was having a creative crisis, their phones would be off for hours while they consoled her, ignoring my calls. Leo, my sweet boy, was just an accessory in their lives, a cute prop to show off to their friends when it was convenient. My role, it seemed, was to be the stable, responsible backdrop against which Jessica's dramatic life could unfold. I had accepted this, not happily, but with a weary resignation. I thought I understood the rules of the game. I had no idea that my parents were capable of changing them so horrifically, and that the game they were playing would eventually target my son. The event that set the stage for the final, devastating conflict happened about a year ago. It was the moment the cracks in our family foundation didn't just show, they splintered, sending shockwaves through my life that I am still feeling today. At the time, I was working for a prestigious design firm. I had been there for 6 years, slowly and diligently climbing the ladder. I loved my job. It was creative, challenging, and it provided a comfortable, stable life for me and Leo. I had just been assigned the lead on a massive project for a new, high-profile client. It was the kind of opportunity that could define a career. It came with a huge budget, creative freedom, and, if successful, a guaranteed promotion to a senior creative director position. It was everything I had been working toward. The only catch was the launch phase. The entire team needed to be on site at the client's headquarters for 1 full week. It was an all-hands-on-deck intensive workshop to finalize the campaign. It was non-negotiable. Normally, this wouldn't have been an issue. My regular babysitter, a wonderful retired woman named Mrs. Gable, was like a surrogate grandmother to Leo. But 2 weeks before the project launch, Mrs. Gable's sister had a serious medical emergency on the other side of the country. She had to leave immediately, and she had no idea when she would be back. Panic set in. I scrambled, calling every daycare, every drop-in center, every babysitting service I could find. But with such short notice, no one had a full week opening. My friends all had their own jobs and children. I was running out of options, and the thought of telling my boss I couldn't manage the project filled me with a cold dread. Finally, with a heavy heart, I did the one thing I always tried to avoid. I asked my parents for a major favor. I called them and explained the situation, emphasizing how critical this week was for my career. To my complete surprise, my mother's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Oh, of course, sweetie," she chirped. "Don't you worry about a thing. We would absolutely love to have our little Leo for a whole week. It will be like a mini vacation for him. Richard, isn't that a wonderful idea?" I could hear my father grunting his agreement in the background. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. "Are you sure?" I asked, almost not daring to believe it. "It's a big commitment. Monday to Friday, drop off at 8, pick up at 6. "Nonsense, it's our grandson," my father boomed over the phone. "It's the least we can do. Family helps family. You go focus on your work, we've got this." I thanked them profusely, feeling a surge of gratitude that momentarily erased years of smaller disappointments. Maybe they were finally seeing me. Maybe they finally understood the importance of my life, my career. I spent the next week preparing, meticulously packing Leo's bag with his favorite pajamas, his dinosaur toys, and his special nightlight. I wrote out a detailed schedule, listed his favorite foods, and taped emergency numbers to the fridge. I was anxious, but I trusted them. They had given me their word. The Sunday before the big week, I dropped Leo off at their house. He was excited, and they fussed over him, showering him with hugs and promising him ice cream. "Now you go get him, Luna," my father said, giving me a rare, proud pat on the shoulder. "Don't even think about us. We're all set." I drove away feeling lighter than I had in years. I went home, laid out my clothes for the morning, and reviewed my presentation one last time. I fell asleep feeling hopeful. The call came at 7 o'clock the next morning, just as I was stepping out of the shower. It was my mother. Her voice had a strange, flustered tone. "Luna, honey, something has come up," she began, without any preamble. My stomach clenched. "What, is Leo okay?" "Oh, he's fine, he's still sleeping. It's not that, it's Jessica." Of course, it was always Jessica. "She just called us. She's in a complete state. She has this incredibly important photo shoot today for her social media. It's a collaboration with a brand and her photographer's assistant canceled. She needs someone to drive up there and help her. She said she needs someone to hold the reflector for the lighting. It's absolutely crucial for her career." I stood there, wrapped in a towel, the water dripping onto the floor, my blood turning to ice. "What are you talking about? The photo shoot is 3 hours away. You promised me. You promised you would watch Leo." "I know, dear, and we feel terrible about it," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your sister. You have a stable job, you understand. We have to go, we're leaving in about an hour." "No," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. "No, you can't. Mom, I will lose this project. I could lose my job, you gave me your word." "Don't be so dramatic, Luna," my father's voice suddenly cut in, sharp and impatient. He must have been on the extension. "We have to prioritize. Jessica's situation is an emergency. Your work is just a workshop. You can miss one day. Tell them you're sick." "It's not just a workshop, it's the launch. I can't miss the first day." I was practically shouting now, my composure shattering. "What am I supposed to do? I have to leave in an hour." "Well, you'll have to figure something out," he said dismissively. "We have to go. We'll drop Leo off at your place on our way out. Be ready in 30 minutes. And then, the line went dead. I stood in stunned silence, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. They weren't just backing out. They were abandoning me, and they were doing it with a casual cruelty that took my breath away. 30 minutes later, a car door slammed outside. I threw on some clothes and ran to the door to see them ushering a sleepy, confused Leo up the walkway. My father wouldn't look at me. He just handed me Leo's backpack. "Sorry about the change of plans," he muttered, already turning back to the car where my mother was waiting. "Sorry," I whispered, looking from his retreating back to my son's bewildered face. "That's all you have to say." My mother gave me a tight, apologetic little wave from the passenger seat. "We'll call you tonight. Tell Jessica we love her." And then they were gone, leaving me on my doorstep with my son, my career, and my entire world crumbling around me. I made a frantic series of calls, my voice cracking with desperation. I called my boss, stammering out a barely coherent excuse about a sudden family emergency. The disappointment in his voice was a physical blow. He was polite but cold. "I see," he said. "Well, Luna, the client is here. The launch is happening now. We'll have to proceed without you." The project was given to a colleague. I spent the day sitting on the sofa with Leo, numb with shock. A month later, when the company announced a round of restructuring, my name was at the top of the list. My boss cited my recent unreliability as a contributing factor. I had been laid off. All because my parents decided that holding a reflector for my sister's Instagram photo was more important than my entire career. When I told them I had lost my job, their response was infuriatingly casual. "Oh, honey, don't worry," my mother said. "You're smart, you'll find another job, but the photos Jessica got that day, they were absolutely stunning. Her career is really about to take off." they felt no remorse. In their minds, they had made the right choice. The year that followed the loss of my job was one of the most difficult periods of my life. The secure, predictable world I had built for myself and Leo had been shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces in a state of quiet, simmering fury. The financial strain was immediate and immense. My severance package was small, and the job market for high-level graphic design positions was fiercely competitive. My savings, which I had carefully accumulated for a down payment on a small house, dwindled at an alarming rate as I covered my mortgage, bills, and Leo's needs. I took on freelance work, piecing together small projects from online platforms. The work was inconsistent and often paid far less than I was worth. I spent my days designing cheap logos for startups and my nights creating social media templates for Pen. Nice, I was working more hours than ever before for a fraction of the income. The stress was a constant, heavy weight on my shoulders. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with calculations and anxieties. Could I afford groceries this week? What if Leo got sick? What if the car broke down? The emotional toll was just as heavy. I was consumed by a sense of failure, even though I knew, logically, that the situation wasn't my fault. The casualness of my parents' betrayal had planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Was I not as valuable as I thought? Was my career, my stability, truly that insignificant? Their actions had undermined my confidence in a way no professional setback ever could have. During this time, my contact with my parents was minimal and strained. I couldn't bring myself to speak to them for the first couple of months. The wound was too raw. When I finally did, our conversations were painfully superficial. They would call and ask, "So, any luck on the job front?" with the same tone they might use to ask about the weather. They never once acknowledged their role in my unemployment. In their narrative, I had been the unfortunate victim of a corporate downsizing, a stroke of bad luck that had nothing to do with them. Any attempt I made to steer the conversation back to their broken promise was met with a defensive wall. "Luna, we can't keep dwelling on the past," my mother would say with a sigh. "What's done is done, we have to look forward." "It's not about dwelling," I tried to explain once, my voice tight with frustration. "It's about acknowledging the consequences of your actions. I lost my job because of what you did." "You lost your job because your company had layoffs," my father retorted sharply. "Don't try to lay that at our feet. We did what we had to do for your sister. Family supports each other's dreams." It was a maddening, circular logic from which there was no escape. They had completely absolved themselves of any responsibility. My sister, Jessica, was equally oblivious. She would send me links to her stunning photos, the very ones that had cost me my livelihood, with captions like, "Aren't they amazing? Mom and Dad were such a huge help." She lived in a bubble of self-absorption, inflated and protected by our parents, and she seemed genuinely incapable of seeing the wreckage she left in her wake. For Leo's sake, I tried to maintain a fragile peace. He loved his grandparents, and their casual affection for him was, at least on the surface, real. I allowed them to see him on birthdays and holidays. I would drop him off for a few hours on a Sunday afternoon, using the time to frantically search for jobs or catch up on freelance work. But I never stayed. I couldn't bear to be in the same room with them for long, to listen to their endless praise of Jessica, while my own life felt like it was in shambles. After nearly 10 months of struggling, I finally found a new job. It was a full-time position with a small marketing agency. The pay was significantly less than my previous role, the benefits weren't as good, and the work was far less inspiring. But it was stable. It was a paycheck. It meant I could stop the frantic freelancing and finally breathe a little. Around the same time, Leo started kindergarten, which lifted a huge burden of childcare costs and logistics. Slowly, a new, more fragile normal began to take shape. I was rebuilding. I started to regain a sliver of my professional confidence. I focused all my energy on my work and on creating a happy, secure home for Leo. We had our little routines: pancake breakfasts on Saturdays, trips to the park after school, and story time every night. Our small apartment was a sanctuary, a world away from the toxic dynamics of my extended family. I thought that by finding a new job, I had inadvertently let my parents off the hook for good. They saw my new employment not as a testament to my resilience, but as proof that they had been right all along. "See," my mother said cheerfully on the phone when I told her the news. "I knew you'd land on your feet. It all worked out for the best, didn't it?" Her words were like a small, sharp jab to the heart. It hadn't worked out for the best. I had clawed my way back from a disaster they had created, and they were taking credit for the outcome. I let the comment slide, too weary to fight. I was rebuilding, and I guarded my newfound peace fiercely. I believed the worst was behind us. I thought we could continue indefinitely in this state of low-contact, polite fiction. I had no idea that they were about to demand a price for my recovery, a price so audacious it would shatter our fragile truce forever. Life had settled into a predictable rhythm. My job was demanding but manageable. Leah was thriving in kindergarten, making new friends and learning to read. We were okay. Not thriving in the way we had been before, but we were stable, and after the turmoil of the recent year, stability felt like a luxury. It was on a Tuesday evening, after I had tucked Leo into bed, that my phone rang. It was my mother. "Luna, honey," she said, her voice unusually somber. "Your father and I need to talk to you. It's important. Can you come over tomorrow night?" A familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Their important talks were never good news for me. They were usually a prelude to some demand on my time or a lecture about my life choices. "I'm pretty busy with work, Mom. Can't we just talk on the phone?" "No," she insisted. "This needs to be in person. It's a family matter. Please, Luna, 7 o'clock. The gravity in her tone worried me. My mind immediately went to their health. Was one of them sick? Despite everything, the thought sent a pang of fear through me. "Okay," I said, my voice softening. "I'll be there. Is everything all right?" "We'll talk tomorrow," she said evasively and hung up. The next evening, I arranged for a neighbor to watch Leo and drove to my parents' house, the same house I had grown up in. The lights were on, casting a warm glow, but as I walked up the driveway, I felt a sense of foreboding. They were waiting for me in the dining room, sitting at the large oak table where we'd had thousands of family dinners. The table where they had announced they were missing my graduation. The table where they'd celebrated every one of Jessica's minor accomplishments. Tonight, the mood was funereal. My father, Richard, stared down at his clasped hands on the table. My mother, Carol, gave me a weak, tremulous smile as I entered. "Thank you for coming, dear," she said, gesturing to the empty chair opposite them. I sat down, my heart pounding. "What's going on? You're scaring me." My father cleared his throat, but it was my mother who spoke. "Luna, we're in a bit of trouble," she began, her voice wavering. "A bit of financial trouble." She pushed a stack of papers across the table toward me. They were a mess of credit card statements, bank notices, and letters printed in bold, urgent red ink. I picked up the top one. It was a Visa statement with a balance that made my eyes widen. The next was a MasterCard, with a similar, staggering number. Underneath them was a letter from a collections agency regarding a defaulted personal loan. I looked up from the papers, my mind struggling to process the figures. The total was astronomical. It was more than my annual salary. "How?" I whispered. "How did this happen?" My father finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of shame and defiance. "It's just, things add up," he mumbled. "Your mother likes to have nice things. And Jessica, well, you know, her career, it requires investment." Suddenly, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. The trips they took with Jessica to scout locations. The expensive camera gear they'd bought her. The designer clothes for her brand. The rent they paid for her trendy apartment in the city because she needed to be where the action is. For years, they had been hemorrhaging money to fund my sister's fantasy life, all while preaching to me about fiscal responsibility. "This is from funding Jessica's lifestyle, isn't it?" I asked, my voice flat. "That's not a fair way to put it," my mother snapped, her fragile demeanor evaporating. "We were supporting our daughter." "You have 2 daughters," I reminded her quietly. My father slammed his hand lightly on the table, a gesture meant to command attention. This isn't the time for that, Luna. The point is, we're in a very bad situation. The bank is threatening to put a lien on the house. I stared at them, a cold, hollow feeling spreading through my chest. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They had lectured me about self-sufficiency, refused me a small loan for my education, and showed zero remorse for costing me my career. And now they sat before me, buried in a mountain of debt from their own foolishness, expecting— what? It was Richard who finally said the words, his voice taking on the firm, authoritative tone he used when he expected to be obeyed. "We need your help. We've calculated what we need to settle the most urgent accounts. We need you to pay it." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "You need me to pay your debt." "Yes," he said, as if it were the most logical request in the world. "You have a good job now, you're stable, you have savings." "My savings are for my son's future, for a down payment on a house so he doesn't have to grow up in a tiny apartment," I exclaimed, my voice rising in disbelief. That's when my mother delivered the line that would echo in my mind for months. She reached across the table, her expression pleading and righteous all at once. "Luna, family helps family," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's what we do. It's your duty as a daughter. We raised you. We provided for you. Now we need you." The phrase hung in the air between us, so laden with hypocrisy it felt like it had a physical weight. Family helps family. The same words they had used to justify abandoning me for Jessica. The same words they had used to excuse their favoritism my entire life. They weren't asking for help, they were issuing a demand. They saw my hard-won stability not as something to be proud of, but as a resource to be tapped. They saw me not as their daughter, but as their solution, their financial escape plan. And in that moment, the last vestiges of my weary resignation burned away, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. The silence in the dining room was thick and heavy. My parents stared at me, their faces etched with a desperate expectation. They genuinely believed I would just agree. They thought their appeal to family duty, a concept they had so conveniently ignored a year ago, would be enough to make me sacrifice my own financial security for their irresponsibility. For a long moment, I said nothing. I just looked at them, at the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and felt a profound, chilling disconnect. I took a deep breath, not to calm myself, but to steady the resolve that was hardening inside me. When I finally spoke, my voice was devoid of the anger and panic I felt. It was low, controlled, and eerily calm. "A little over a year ago," I began, my eyes fixed on my father, "I had a job I loved. I was on track for a promotion that would have secured my son's future for years to come. All I needed from you was 1 week of help. 1 week." My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Luna, we don't need to rehash all that." "Oh, I think we do," I interrupted, my gaze shifting to her. "Because you said something to me back then. You said you had to prioritize Jessica's emergency. A photo shoot. You prioritized a photo shoot over my entire career. You left me and my 5-year-old son on my doorstep so you could go play roadie for your favorite child." "That's a vile way to put it," my father snarled, his face beginning to flush with anger. "Is it untrue?" I challenged him. "Did you or did you not leave me with no childcare on the most important day of my professional life after giving me your absolute word you would be there?" He just glared, saying nothing. "I lost that project," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "And then I lost my job. Do you have any idea what this past year has been like for me? Do you know how many nights I stayed up, terrified I wouldn't be able to make my mortgage payment? Do you know what it feels like to have to choose between buying new shoes for your growing son and putting gas in the car? No, of course you don't. Because you were busy buying Jessica new lenses for her camera and paying for her networking brunches." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the table. "I rebuilt my life, with no help from you. I found a new job, a lesser job, and I clawed my way back to some semblance of stability for my son. This money," I said, gesturing to the pile of bills, "this debt is not my responsibility. This is the consequence of your choices, your favoritism, your inability to say no to Jessica. I looked my mother directly in the eye. You want to talk about family helps family? When my life was falling apart, when I was scared and desperate, where was my help? Your version of family is a one-way street. It flows from me to you, from me to Jessica, but it never, ever flows back. The moment had arrived. I straightened up in my chair, the years of resentment, of being second best, of being the sensible one who was always expected to understand, coalescing into a single, powerful word. No, I said. The word landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. What did you say? My father asked, his voice a low growl of disbelief. I said no, I repeated, more firmly this time. I will not be paying your debt. I will not sacrifice my son's future to bail you out of a mess you created by spoiling my sister. The discussion is over. For a second, there was only stunned silence. They looked at me as if I had just started speaking in a foreign language. Then, the shock curdled into pure rage. Richard's face turned a mottled, furious red. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the wood floor. Ungrateful, after everything we've done for you, we put a roof over your head for 18 years. Yes, you did the bare minimum required of parents. I shot back, rising to my feet as well. That doesn't entitle you to my life savings. My mother, Carol, burst into tears. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of manipulation, a tactic she had perfected over the years. How can you be so cruel? She sobbed, her voice rising hysterically. We're your parents, we're going to lose our home, and you just sit there, so cold and heartless. You're punishing us for one tiny mistake. A tiny mistake, I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. A tiny mistake cost me my job, my savings, and a year of my life. This isn't punishment. This is a boundary, something I should have established with you people a long, long time ago. I grabbed my purse from the chair. I'm leaving. Do not contact me about this again. You walk out that door, and you are no longer our daughter, Richard bellowed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You made it clear I was never really your daughter a long time ago, I said softly, turning my back on them. I was just your backup plan, and the backup plan is officially retired. I walked out of that house, my heart hammering against my ribs, and didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. When I got inside my quiet apartment, I checked on Leo, sleeping soundly in his bed, and the rightness of my decision settled over me like a shield. My relief, however, was short-lived. The harassment started less than an hour later. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I can't believe you would abandon your family. Your father is devastated. Then another from my father. You will regret this. You have made a powerful enemy today. The texts soon became calls. They left long, rambling voicemails, alternating between tearful pleas and furious accusations. They called me at work, forcing me to block their numbers on my office line. The golden child, Jessica, even chimed in with a text dripping with self-pity. Thanks a lot, Luna. Now Mom and Dad are in a panic, and it's stressing me out right before my big trip to Bali for a wellness retreat. Some sister you are. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it all was staggering. But I held firm. I didn't respond. I thought their anger would eventually burn itself out. I believed that by refusing to engage, I was taking away their power. I was wrong. I had severely underestimated how far they would go to get what they wanted. I thought the battle was over money. I was about to find out they were willing to wage a war over my son. A week of silence followed my explosive departure from my parents' house. The barrage of angry texts and manipulative voicemails had stopped, and a small, naive part of me hoped they had finally accepted my decision. I thought perhaps they were grappling with the consequences of their actions and had realized they needed to solve their own problems. That fragile hope was obliterated by a sharp, authoritative knock on my apartment door on a Thursday afternoon. I opened it to find two people, a man and a woman, standing in the hallway. The woman offered a polite but professional smile. "Are you Luna?" she asked, holding up an ID badge. "My name is Sarah, and this is my colleague Mark. We're with Child Protective Services." My blood ran cold, the floor seemed to drop out from beneath me. CPS, I stammered, my mind unable to form a coherent thought. Why, what is this about? We received an anonymous report expressing some concerns, Sarah said gently. It alleged that your home environment is unsafe, that there is evidence of neglect, and that you are emotionally unstable and unfit to care for your son Leo. We're required by law to follow up on any such report. May we come in? I was so stunned I could barely move. Anonymous, I knew, with a certainty that was as absolute as the beating of my own heart, who had made that call. This was their retaliation. This was their punishment for my defiance. They couldn't get my money, so they were trying to take my child. Nodding numbly, I stepped aside and let them in. My apartment, while small, was always clean. Leo's toys were neatly organized in bins, the dishes were done, and there was food in the refrigerator. It was a home filled with love and care. The social workers walked through the living room, into the kitchen, and peered into Leo's brightly decorated bedroom. I followed them, my hands trembling. This is a lie, I said, my voice shaking. This is a malicious, false report. It was made by my parents. I just refused to give them a large sum of money, and now they're doing this. Sarah looked at me with an unreadable expression. We hear things like that often, Ms. Luna. Our job is just to assess the child's living situation. I spent the next hour answering their questions, my voice cracking as I explained the entire sordid story, the job loss, the debt, the confrontation. I showed them my spotless kitchen, the healthy food in my pantry, the photos of me and a happy, smiling Leo that covered the walls. The social workers were thorough and professional, but the entire experience was profoundly humiliating. To have to defend my love for my son, to have my fitness as a mother questioned because of my parents' vindictive rage, was a violation unlike any I had ever experienced. When they finally left, Sarah told me that, based on their initial visit, the home seemed safe and the allegations appeared unfounded. But the case would have to remain open for investigation. They would need to speak to Leo at his school. The terror and shame lingered long after they were gone. My parents had weaponized the system designed to protect children and aimed it directly at my heart. I thought that was the lowest they could sink. Again, I was wrong. 2 days later, during my lunch break, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, and my world tilted on its axis. It was the principal of Leo's kindergarten, Mrs. Davis. Her voice was tight with urgency and concern. "Luna, you need to get down to the school immediately," she said. "What's wrong? Is Leo hurt?" I gasped, already grabbing my keys and purse. "Leo is safe with me in my office," she said, trying to reassure me. "But your parents are here. They're in the front office demanding to sign him out. They're telling the secretary that you had a mental breakdown and that you called them to come and get him. They're causing quite a scene, Luna. I've refused to release him, of course, but they won't leave." The rage that surged through me was a physical force, hot and volcanic. It burned away every last ounce of fear and replaced it with a cold, terrifying fury. This wasn't just a lie to a faceless government agency. They were at my son's school. They were trying to physically take him. I don't remember the drive. I only remember bursting through the front doors of the school, my eyes scanning for them. I found them in the main office, just as the principal had said. My father was red-faced, jabbing his finger at the school secretary, a young woman who looked like she was on the verge of tears. My mother stood beside him, wringing her hands and putting on a masterful performance of a worried, distraught grandmother. "I am his grandfather," Richard was booming. "His mother is unwell, she needs our help." Then they saw me. My mother's face fell. My father's expression hardened into a venomous glare. From a side door, Leo came running. "Mommy," he cried, his face streaked with tears as he wrapped his arms around my legs. He was scared and confused. The sight of his terrified little face was the final catalyst. I scooped him into my arms, holding him tight against my chest, and turned to face my parents. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously low. "Luna, we were just so worried." my mother began, taking a step toward me. Don't you dare, I snarled, taking a step back. Don't you ever come near my son again, do you hear me? You are unstable, my father shouted. Look at you, you're hysterical. The boy is better off with us until you sort yourself out. That's when the principal, Mrs. Davis, stepped forward, her face a mask of stern authority. Richard Carroll, she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. I am going to ask you to leave school property this instant. If you do not, I will be calling the police and having you escorted off the premises. My father opened his mouth to argue, but the look on the principal's face made him stop. Defeated and seething, they turned and stormed out of the office. I stood there, trembling, clutching my crying son, the full reality of what had just happened crashing down on me. They hadn't just tried to hurt me. They had come for my child. The line had been crossed, and there was no going back. This was no longer a family dispute. This was war. The drive home from the school was silent, except for Leo's quiet sniffles from his car seat. I kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, my heart aching at the sight of his confused, worried face. He didn't understand what had happened, only that his grandparents, people he was supposed to trust, had scared him. When we got back to our apartment, I held him on the sofa, wrapped in his favorite blanket, until he fell asleep in my arms. As I watched him sleep, the last traces of grief for the family I once thought I had evaporated, replaced by the steely, unshakable resolve of a mother protecting her child. They had left me no choice. The very next morning, I was sitting in the office of a family law attorney, a woman named Ms. Evans with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I recounted the entire story, my voice steady as I detailed every event, starting with the loss of my job and culminating in the horrifying scene at Leo's school. I had brought evidence. I had printed out the hateful text messages. I provided the CPS case number and the name of the social worker. I had a written statement from Mrs. Davis, the principal, detailing my parents' attempt to unlawfully remove my son from her care. Ms. Evans listened intently, her expression growing more grim with every word. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and professional outrage. Luna, she said, what you have described is not a family squabble. It's a campaign of harassment and attempted custodial interference. Their actions, particularly the false CPS report and the incident at the school, are legally actionable. We have more than enough to proceed. The validat. Iron in her words was a profound relief. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't being dramatic. I was a victim of a calculated, malicious attack. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. First, she said, her tone decisive, we send a clear and unequivocal message. She drafted a cease and desist letter right then and there. It was a masterpiece of legal language, cold, sharp, and utterly unambiguous. It detailed their actions and stated that any further contact with me or my son, whether direct or indirect, in person, by phone, or through any third party, would result in immediate legal action, including a lawsuit for damages and a petition for a permanent restraining order. We sent it via certified mail that same afternoon. A signature would be required, ensuring they couldn't claim they never received it. For 2 weeks there was silence, a blessed, peaceful silence. The CPS case was officially closed, with the social worker noting in the file that the report was unfounded and appears to be malicious in nature. I started to breathe again. I thought perhaps the lawyer's letter had finally scared them into stopping. But my parents' delusion and entitlement knew no bounds. One evening, as I was returning from taking out the trash, I saw their car parked down the street from my apartment building. My father was in the driver's seat, just watching my building. My mother was beside him. The sight of them, lurking like predators, sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins. They were violating the cease and desist. They were stalking me. My hands shook, but my mind was clear. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone, took a picture of their car for evidence, and called the police. Then I called Ms. Evans. They're here, I said. They're outside my apartment. Good, she said, her voice grimly satisfied. They've made our next step for us. I'll file the petition for the restraining order first thing in the morning. The court hearing was a surreal experience. My parents were there with a lawyer of their own, looking indignant and portraying themselves as loving, concerned grandparents who were being cruelly cut off by their unstable daughter. Their lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive and emotional. But facts are stubborn things. Ms. Evans calmly presented our evidence: the principal's sworn statement, the conclusion of the CPS report, the copies of the threatening text messages, the certified mail receipt for the cease and desist letter, and the police report from the night they were parked outside my home. When my father took the stand, he was arrogant and blustered through his testimony. Under Ms. Evans's sharp cross-examination, his story began to fall apart. He couldn't explain why, if they were so concerned for my well-being, their first action was to try and take my son from school behind my back. My mother cried on the stand, but her tears seemed theatrical and hollow in the sterile environment of the courtroom. The judge, a stern-faced woman who had seen it all, listened to everything patiently. When it was over, she looked at my parents with an expression of deep disapproval. "The evidence presented here," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "paints a clear picture of targeted harassment. Your actions were not born of concern for your grandson's welfare. They were retaliatory and malicious. They were an attempt to punish your daughter for refusing to yield to your financial demands." She granted the restraining order. It was effective immediately for a period of 3 years. They were forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, my workplace, and Leo's school. They were forbidden from contacting me in any way. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a strange combination of emotions. There was a deep, aching grief for the loss of my family, for the parents I wished I had. But overwhelming that grief was a profound sense of peace. It was the peace of safety, the peace of a locked door, the peace of a final, unbreakable boundary. My life is smaller now and quieter. It's just me and Leo. Our family unit is a party of 2. I have explained to him in simple, age-appropriate terms that his grandparents are not safe for us to be around right now and that my job is to keep him safe. He accepts it with the simple trust of a child. My sister, Jessica, sent me one final, venomous text, calling me a monster for what I did to our parents. I read it, deleted it, and blocked her number for good. The silence they left behind is not empty. It's filled with the sound of Leo's laughter as we build Lego castles on the living room floor. It's filled with the quiet hum of my computer as I work at a job that, while not my dream, provides for us. It's filled with the freedom to live without fear, without obligation, without waiting for the next betrayal. I have lost a mother, a father, and a sister. But I have saved myself and I have protected my son. And in the end, that's the NLY family that matters. So I have to ask you, the listeners, what would you have done? When the people who are supposed to love you the most become the biggest threat, where do you draw the line? Is there any line you wouldn't cross to protect your child?